This is online group 5 team project presentation. My name is Matthew Oden, and this is part 1 of 4 videos done by myself and my teammates Shelby Rangel, Nelson Robertson, and Joseph Tilley. So business understanding. This is the first step in the CRISP DM model. So let's get right into it. What we're interested in is understanding injury severity of vehicle accidents. And who all would be interested in this, you might ask? Vehicle manufacturers, government administrators, officials of regulatory agencies, legislators, consumers. I mean, we're talking about a lot of potential impact here, both economically and societal, that can be gleaned from having a predictive model that predicts the severity of these accidents. I mean, we can see an increased effort in vehicle safety by the amount of features that have sprung up in the past couple of years. Rear view cameras. We've also got all these motion detectors on the sides. Let's see, even alarms for when people are falling asleep at the wheel. So let's take the next step into data understanding, the second step in the CRISP-DM process. Right. In order to analyze the injury severity of vehicle accidents, we use data captured and prepared by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. In particular, we were interested in 4 of the data sets / tables. The accident table, this had information pertaining to the characteristics of the crash and the environmental conditions at the time of said crash. The next table is the distract table. This data file contains information about driver distractions. There's at least 1 record per in-transport motor vehicle. Each distraction is its own record. The person table, this contains information describing all the people involved in the crash, including motorists, drivers, and passengers of in-transport motor vehicles, and non-motorists. Examples: pedestrians, pedocyclists, cyclists. Man, they need their own line. It provides information such as age, sex, vehicle occupant, restraint use, and injury severity. There is 1 record per person. The last table is the vehicle table. This contains all information regarding in-transport motor vehicles and drivers of in-transport motor vehicles who are involved in the crash. There's 1 record per in-transport motor vehicle. I will now proceed to go into some detail as to why these variables were chosen from the 4 tables. Granted, we had over 150 variables to choose from, and finding the right variables for our model was very important. So we ultimately ended up with 28 variables, and now I'm just going to provide a little bit of extra detail on what these variables are and why we chose them. Alright, age_IM. Age is clearly a big factor when involved in accidents. You can be 15 and legally drive in the United States as long as you have a licensed adult accompanying you. Also, elderly residents are sometimes forced to give up their license to get off the roads to prevent accidents. So the older you are, potential risk is high for accidents. The reason why we chose this instead of the age variable is because it was imputed, so that way the unknown age and not reported age were removed, so we didn't have to do any extra filtering. Next variable is airbags. Clearly, if the airbag was deployed or not. If it's not deployed, the car is either malfunctioning, recall, or the accident just wasn't severe enough. Next one, alcohol result. This determines if the person in the accident had alcohol in their system, yes or no. Pretty plain and simple there. Deformed. This records the amount of damage sustained by this vehicle as indicated on the police crash report. Clearly, the more messed up the vehicle is, this accident was most likely severe. The next one is per alc imputed. This was basically was alcohol involved in the incident? Not saying it was the cause of the crash, but some slight implications there. Drug res 1. This basically tells us, did the person, have drugs in their system? Pretty simple there. Next set, eject. underscore IM. This data element describes the ejection status and the degree of ejection for this person, excluding motorcycle occupants. Basically, it's sort of like the age. Any sort of imputed variable is basically automatically excluding unknowns and not reported. Fire underscore EXP. This data element identifies whether a fire in any way related to the crash occurred in this vehicle. Alright, the next one is the gross vehicle weight rating, and basically this one, pretty plain simple there. What's the weight of the vehicle? If there was no official one, there was kind of a best guess. Moving on. Has underscore INV. This data element identifies whether the vehicle is carrying hazardous materials, some that might lead to either a fire, explosion, some sort of thing that might increase the severity. Impact 1, imputed. This data element identifies the area on this vehicle that produced the first instance of injury to non-motorists or occupants of this vehicle, or that resulted in the first instance of damage to other property or to this vehicle. Basically, same as Impact 1, just all the unknowns have been removed, and so have the not reported. Injury severity. This is our dependent variable. This is what all other 27 independent variables will be used to help predict this one right here. Basically, this one is what is the severity of the injury to the person in the crash using the CAPCO scale, which is killed, fatal, A, incapacitating, B, non-incapacitating, C, possible, O, property damage only. Alright, INT HWI. This identifies whether the crash occurred on an interstate or interstate highway. Alright, J-knife, jackknife. Basically, did a jackknife apply in this instance? LGT con, imputed. This data element records the type, level of light that existed at the time of the crash as indicated in the police report. Basically, no unknowns, no reports, or no not reports. Mancoal, imputed. This data element describes the orientation of two motor vehicles in transport when they are involved in the first harmful event of a collision crash. If the first harmful event is not a collision between two motor vehicles in transport, it is classified as such. Basically, there are no unknowns and no not reported. MDRD STRD. This data element identifies attributes which best describe this driver's attention in driving prior to the driver's realization of an impending critical event, or just prior to impact if realization of an impending critical event does not occur. Distraction from the primary task of driving occurs when drivers divert their attention from the driving task to some other activity. Clearly, this is an important variable that needed to be in this model. The next one, MDLYR underscore IM. This data element identifies the manufacturer's model of the year. Basically, the older the car is, less safety features built in. Excludes unknown model years and not reports. Alright, month. The data element records the month in which the crash occurred. Basically having this one here if we're interested in doing some time series analysis. NumIng underscore imputed. This data element records the number of persons injured in the vehicle and is derived by counting all persons with injury severity of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in a vehicle. This count includes fatally injured occupants. Clearly, this is definitely important. We got rid of all the unknown numbers injured, which was imputed, and we got rid of the not reported. P underscore crash 2. This data element identifies the attribute that best describes the critical event which made this crash imminent. Something occurred which made the collision possible. Critical event is coded for each vehicle and identifies the circumstances leading to the vehicle's first impact in the crash. These data elements were designed to identify 1. What the vehicle was doing just prior to the critical pre-crash event, 2. What made the vehicle's situation critical, 3. What was the corrective action made, if any, to this critical situation, and 4. What was the location, 5. And stability of the vehicle just prior to impact. Region. This data element clearly just defines which part of the country the crash occurred. Rel_road identifies the location of the crash as it relates to the position with or outside the traffic way based on the first harmful event. Rel_JCT1 identifies the crash's location with respect to presence in an interchange area. The coding of this data element is done in 2 subfields and is based on the location of the first harmful event of the crash. There is no unknowns and no not reporteds with this variable. Speed REL. This data element records whether the driver's speed was related to the crash as indicated by law enforcement. Weather_IM. This data element records the prevailing atmospheric conditions that existed at the time of the crash as indicated in the police crash report. Basically, this data element identifies up to 2 values. If more than 2 atmospheric conditions were reported, the 2 conditions that most affect visibility were selected. Basically, there are no unknowns and no not reported in this. Weekday, this basically tells us which day of the week occurred. And last of the variables is work zone. This data element identifies a motor vehicle traffic crash in which the first harmful event occurs within the boundaries of a work zone or on an approach to or exit from a work zone, resulting from an activity, behavior, or control related to the movement of the traffic units through the work zone. As I have now completed the business understanding and data understanding, Joseph Tilley will now take over with data preparation.